cuffed him and we took him down to the station. We called Brian. We don't touch the briefcase at all. And so Brian comes down, and I said, Brian, is this your briefcase? And he says, yeah. And I said, well, open it and tell me if there's anything missing. And he goes, well, my money's missing. My papers are here, but what's this stuff in the baggie? And the guy's going, hey, man, don't burn me. Those ain't my drugs. Those are your drugs. And I said, wait a minute. There's a law in the state of California called possession. I said, you've got possession of those drugs. Those aren't our drugs. So the guy did time for the Beatles' drugs, which I thought was pretty funny.
What was that guy's name?
If I had screwed that thing up, and I still have sweats in the middle of the night, if I had screwed that up, would I have ruined their career? Because at that point in time, Brian Epstein told me, he said, look, he wanted to pay him. And I said, you can't pay him, Brian. You pay him, and he'll never stop coming. He'll always be after you. He said, you don't understand. Mothers don't want their daughters to see the Beatles because they think they got long hair. Well, they were just mop top, dressed like $1 million kids then, So under those, later on, it didn't make any difference. They said, we do drugs. What are you going to do about it? But it was, we really turned the tables on that guy.
Well, what was his name? Do you remember?
I'm not going to tell you that.
Okay. All right. Now, what about Frank Sinatra? What'd you do with Frank Sinatra?
Oh, God. Frank Sinatra was another guy I was taking a bullet for. I was his bodyguard, and we had a lot of fun. I mean, we'd be backstage, and he was a sports fan, and he'd go, Don, find us a television set so we can watch the basketball game or the baseball game or whatever. And we're both dressed the same. I mean, I got a tuxedo. He's got a tuxedo. The only, two difference. He's Frank Sinatra. I got a gun under my cummerbund. And so one night we were doing a charity event. Don Rickles was there. And Rickles was, Rickles liked to drink, and you couldn't tell if he was drunk or sober with his act. And so Frank is out on, Frank and I are watching the basketball game, and they're saying, come on, Frank, Gordon Jenkins is starting to play and all this. And so we're walking out, still looking at that, and we're talking about the game. And when we cross over the wings, God, there's Frank Sinatra saying, come fly with me. I'm going, Jesus. I'm thinking, this is my buddy. This is the greatest entertainer in the world. And so he's got to the point where he's singing One for My Baby. And here comes Rickles. Been back at the bar backstage. And so I said, where the hell are you going? I'd known Rickles for a long time, and I grabbed him. I said, where the hell do you think you're going? He said, no, I love it. I said, he won't love it. I said, he's got the audience in the palm of his hand. He's got the cigarette lit. He's got the bottle. He's got the glass of Jack Daniels, and he's singing One for My Baby. He's got them all captured. No. And so like a dummy kid, I said, well, it's on you. Well, it wasn't on him. It was on me because I let him go out there. And Frank was sitting on a bar stool, and he grabs Frank, bends him over, kisses him on the lips, sets him back up, and runs back out laughing. Well, first of all, Frank thought somebody had blindsided him from the audience and scared the hell out of him. And then he realized what had happened. And then he looked at me like, you actually let that happen. And I thought, man, I am a dead man, and I deserve it. And so anyway, after that, he finally gets the audience right back where he wanted him. And as he's leaving the stage, he walks up to me. He's got that look on his face. He says, where's Rickles? And I said, yeah, Frank, I'll go get Rickles. I'll hold him. We'll wrap him around. I said, that's a great idea. And so Rickles is still back at the bar, and I grab him by the scuff of the neck. And I said, you know what? I said, you finally get a turn. After all these years, it's your turn. And I drag him over there, and Frank walks over and kisses him on the cheek and says, thanks, Pally, you were great. He looks over to me. He says, Don, are you ready to go? Well, I crossed myself and said, oh, yeah. And as see, one thing about Frank, it was loyalty. He knew that I'd take a bullet for him. And as we walked off, he said, you're never going to let that happen again, are you? And I said, no, Frank, I'm not. and he never brought it up again. Which I figured, the least he could do is fire me for that. But that's just one of the many stories with Frank Sinatra. Great guy.
What about Jerry Lewis? What'd you do with Jerry Lewis?
Well, Jerry Lewis, I had two different cases. One was a kid that had come out of the Midwest and was in his fan club and kept writing him letters and saying, I work as an intern for nothing and all this and that. And Jerry brought him in and actually made him part of the household, would invite him over for dinner. And this kid says, look, I can organize your warehouse. Your warehouse is in terrible, terrible shape. Well, what the kid started doing, he started selling the memorabilia off. I mean, original copies of like the Patsy, and Jerry had the only collection of the Colgate Comedy Hour in Spanish, and we caught an ad. Is what we did, and so anyway, this guy was. You talk about somebody that was hard to interrogate. He just felt like it belonged to him, and so. The other one was his son, his youngest son. It was sort of a love-hate relationship. He wanted to be like Jerry, but he didn't want to put the work in. And he stole several $100,000 worth of jewelry from his mother and took off. And he was at Vegas, and he was, we got word he was shooting craps there and everything. And so I had to chase him, and I finally found him and brought him back. But he was bipolar or something, and he had problems. But Jerry was always very nice to me. And I'll tell you what, everybody I've talked to said, "Oh man, when Jerry goes off, nobody goes off like him. I mean, you don't even want to be around." And I'm thinking, well, my turn's coming sooner or later. But he was never anything but just very kind to me.
Are you familiar with that story with Jerry and his housekeeper, his maid, his living maid, where she had a boyfriend and Jerry got the guy thrown in prison?
No.
That happened here in Vegas. Yeah. Anyway, it's a long story, but if you're not familiar with it, let's kind of move on here. Okay. That was Jerry Lewis we were just talking about, right?
Yeah, right. Jerry Lewis.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. Now, what did you do in the Michael Jackson investigation?
Well, I was the first person outside law enforcement that knew that that Michael Jackson had been accused of child molestation. That was the Chandler boy, the first one. Okay. I had the policeman that went up there and took the report, and he gave me a call that night, and he said, it's going to hit the fan. Now, this is something that we knew for a long time. I'd actually worked for a media outlet. And I had went up to Los Olivos, where Neverland was, to cover the Elizabeth Taylor, Larry Fertinsky wedding, and so everybody had heard about him liking little boys, but nobody ever had any proof. And anyway, in my book, I mean, there's stuff I wouldn't even talk about. Because it's so sordid, but in my book, you read what happened there, and it doesn't leave much to the imagination. The way he courted this boy, and see, I was following them around. I mean, he was taking over the dolphin pool at the Mirage at night. He had his own suite there, and every place he'd go, he'd bring the little boy, the mother, and she had an infant, half sister to the boy, and these people are going to Monaco. They're going all over the place. He's dressing this little boy like he is and everything. So then I dug into it, and I find out that she has relinquished custody of the boy to her ex-husband, the father. And it said that she can see the boy on the weekend, but if she even as much as lets the boy have a phone conversation with Michael Jackson, then a third party will be present during during her visitation at her expense, which I've been that third party before, just not on that case. But then all of a sudden, you had Burt Fields and you had these high-powered attorneys jump in and start trying to get the custody back. And to me, that's like that's like trying to get prey back. I mean, you got to understand what was going on there. I mean, why would she just give him up and no back alimony, no nothing? So, I mean, I've been a private detective all my life. It didn't take much to read between the lines there. And then they were successful in having the boy return to the mother. And the day that they were to return the boy, the father had him taken to a psychiatrist, and he told all about the molestation. And California law states that if that's told to a psychiatrist, they must report it to the police. So I was privy to the police report and to the child service report, and this was a 12, 13-year-old boy. I couldn't train Brando to do what he did on the deposition. I mean, I could break a kid down like that and nothing flat. This kid don't change one single word in any of his reports. The only reason why I can figure that is because he was telling the truth. And then, the stuff that just happened about them finding all this pornography in a locker and all this stuff. Hey, we knew about that way back when. I mean, that's nothing new. I don't even know why they're bringing it up, because the police has had custody of that stuff for a long time. And the boy identified markings on his genitals and stuff like that. I mean, there again, and here's the culprit in this whole thing, is Gil Garcetti. He was not only the attorney for that, but he was the attorney for O.J. Simpson, the prosecution. And what he thought he would do, in my opinion, would put his feet up on the desk and let the civil case go through, and then he could use that in a criminal case. Well, when the boy made a settlement, and another thing in the state of California, you can't make a juvenile testify under those circumstances. Well, he lost his case, and then he bitched about, this. Michael Jackson should have been arrested the night that the policeman went and took the report, and the same thing with O.J. Simpson. I'm telling you, when Gil Garcetti does a press conference, they should have made him wear donkey ears. Because it didn't take a brain to figure out if O.J. had been tried by a jury of his peers, which was Santa Monica, instead of downtown L.A., which those black people were not a jury of his peers. He had very little to do with them. And so that, and I used to hang with O.J. I used to hang around with him at the Luau restaurant and what have you. And Bob Shapiro, I saw Bob right after he had been arrested. I saw Bob Shapiro at a De La Hoya fight in Vegas, and he said, O.J. would like to have you on the team. And I said, Bob, he's guilty. And he said, so what? And I said, well, you're right. He deserves the defense. But I said, I'm going to tell you something. Yeah, I've got you, I've got F. Lee Bailey, I've got Johnny Cochran, I got Dershowitz, I got all these guys. And I know what's going to happen when it comes time to pay up the bills. I'm going to be the last guy down there. Right. I said, you put $1 million, put $1 million in my trust account, and I'll get him off. Well, it didn't take me to get him off. All it took was that jury to get him off.
Well, let me ask, when you were working on the Michael Jackson case, who was your client?
I had several clients, and it was media client. Yeah.
Okay. You know what?
I was on the front page of the on both O.J. and Michael Jackson. I was on the front page of the LA Times several times, giving my opinion on what was